Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Stacking Growth Live. We are going to be talking all about paid innovations when it comes to LinkedIn tactics. I have my notebook ready because I assume this is going to be a conversation where we're going to be scribbling it down really quickly on tactics that you could deploy tomorrow, the next week, next year, things like that. So super excited that you're all with us. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the true stars of the show for today's call. Jim Burke, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then Malin, I'll let you also introduce yourself after that.
Hi everyone, this is Canberk and I'm the Global Head of Paid at Cognism and Advisory Board at Hockeystack. And I've been at Cognism for over a year and a half, and yeah, we have been managing a lot of campaigns. So although I'm not seeing a lot of accounts like Malin, I think I got exposed to a hell of campaigns. So today I'm so pumped to be here.
Likewise. Hi, everyone. I'm Malin. I'm a senior performance marketing manager here at Refine Labs. I've been here for over 2 years, and I'm very, very excited for the discussion that we're having today.
Awesome. You can definitely sense the excitement, right? Okay, so just a little bit of housekeeping for today's conversation. We're going to go over three main experiments that Jim Burke and Malin are currently either running or have ran, and some insights based on these three experiments. We're going to be sprinkling in questions throughout this conversation. So for instance, we're on the LinkedIn Thought Leadership experiment. If you do have questions about that, please throw it in the chat. We'll want to make sure that we answer them. Anything else we're going to also reserve towards the end. I just want to make sure that we can get through all of the great insights because I know it's going to be jam-packed, but please throw them in the chat. If you're like me, I'll forget it if I don't put it immediately in the chat when I think about it. So put it there. We'll reserve it for the end if it doesn't go into one of those categories or we need to move along with time. And then the very end, we're going to reserve plenty of time for open Q&A and just discussion. I want to get Jim Burke and Malin's take on other experiments that they currently have their eye on or that they're currently experimenting with and see if we can, sneak out a couple of early insights from them. But definitely want to reserve as much time as possible for you all to ask them questions as well. So again, if you have questions throughout any of this time, please throw them in the chat and we'll ensure that we get them answered. Definitely want this to be a conversation. I know it's going to be a good one. All right, so we're going to start off with a bang here. When it comes to paid LinkedIn, I feel like you can't go anywhere without talking about LinkedIn thought leadership ads. So we're going to kick it over. Jim Burke, I will let you kick this one off. Talk a little bit about what you're doing at Cognism and insights that you have. Give us a little bit of background, and then Malin will also talk about it then as well.
Sure. Thought leadership has been a really interesting experiment for us. Our account managers last year around this time, even like before in Q3, they told us that, okay, there's this new product coming, new campaign coming, and we will be in beta. And the beta was supposed to start in Q4. They sent us this document about the ad structure and what we could have been doing. And obviously, it was a good idea, but we didn't want to wait for a couple of months because the fact was that we already had enough content by our thought leaders, by myself, by Alice, Liam, Fran. We were already posting a lot on LinkedIn. And we thought about how we can reverse engineer that. Okay, this new campaign type is coming, but we already have the content. Like, do we really need to wait for 3 months for it? So we started with a really easy test in which we basically screenshot our thought leadership content posted by our own influencers, thought leaders, and then use that as a ad creative. And as you can see from right-hand side, we basically wrote an explanation and then put the screenshot, and the screenshot would direct people to our website, to a blog post which was about this content as well. Like the content team would write a blog post about it, so it would be an explanation of the screenshot that we promote. And we ran this type of campaigns for like 2 months, and the reactions were interesting. Like, okay, we are looking at CTR, we are looking at engagement rate because it was a rich campaign at the end of it, although we were sending the traffic to our website. And the reactions were really interesting. Like, okay, we were getting all of the engagement, but some people hated us, some people loved the ad type. And back then we were targeting two main personas, salespeople and marketing people. Salespeople loved it. Like they were commenting under the ad and they were like, oh my God, this is so creative, amazing. But marketing people, they either like it or hate it. Like some people said I was basically tricking them. Some people said I don't know what I'm doing. The bounce rate would be off the charts and I'm basically optimizing the campaigns for clicks, which was definitely not true. And after like 5-6 weeks, back then we were not using hockey sticks, so we were looking at first touch in Salesforce, and even with first touch we were seeing that these campaigns somehow are bringing pipeline. And in 2 months after we start seeing that the pipeline is coming, the beta was released and we were in beta. Ashley, can you please go to the next slide?
Absolutely.
Thank
Real
you.
quick, Janberg, I love how you like tried to recreate basically a thought leader ad by screenshotting and before the product was even released. That's a pretty awesome tactic.
Thank you. And there are actually some people that they were really angry about it. Like there was this guy, I don't even remember, product market manager at Twitch. He reports me to LinkedIn. Apparently I was
Oh
doing
wow.
something shady. I was like, dude, wait for 2 months and it is coming.
Love it.
So yeah, in Q4, now we are in beta, and I was like, okay, now we can allocate some budget. And normally for a new campaign type, I allocate a small budget. But here, although I still allocate a small budget, since we smoke tested before a similar type of campaign, we increased the budget allocation because we knew the possibility what could have happened if it works well. So we use Alice, Liam, and my post for leadership content. Alice's content was more for leadership. Liam's was more about how we changed from lead gen to demand gen, and mine was about basically me mumbling about paid media. And we chose two audiences: individual contributors and ICP, our decision makers. Alice's and Liam's posts were for the ICP decision makers, and my posts were individual contributor decision makers. We kept the same structure for the audience, so everything was the same, and we used the reach objective. The only thing this time, instead of using ad creatives, we basically use our own post. And in Q1, can you go
Actually,
forward?
before you jump into the results, Janberg, I think one thing important to call out here is when you're comparing a thought leadership ad to something like what we saw on the earlier side, which is a single image ad format, which you kind of hacked around to make it look like a thought leader ad, is that thought leadership ads on the LinkedIn UI don't have a call to action button. So if you go back one slide, you'll notice that this is using a single image ad which has that learn more button at the bottom, which will direct clicks to the landing page. On the thought leadership ad format, there isn't a CTA button, as you can see here in the screenshot. So
Is it me? Sorry, I just lost you. Okay, you are back. Sorry.
yeah, so something important to note, like what you should expect these kind of ad formats is don't expect tons of clicks. Obviously, there's nowhere to go, but there is kind of a way that you can direct people to a landing page, which is to include, a link at the top of the post, perhaps in your original, organic post that you're sharing, link here to full article or whatever, and then kind of dive into the full body of your post. But just wanted
Actually,
to call
you're
that
so
out.
right. I missed it because in the first type when we use the screenshots, okay, that was CTA and we were directing traffic direct to our website, and we were able to track the actual influence by our Salesforce. But with the new format, it was not possible. Like there was no CTA, and we had to find a solution. And as you said, the solution was to edit the post and then put the CTA. And we tested this from the beginning of Q4 to the end of Q1, so around like 5.5 months. And the results were really remarkable. And actually, even LinkedIn team didn't believe us. Then they look at our data and they included us to the case study. The CPC was 40x cheaper than our usual CPC. And it is not only our CPC in the content campaigns, it is our general CPC. So it is including all of the video view campaigns, all of the reach campaigns. And yeah, it was 40x cheaper. And the CTR was almost 9% in our targeted campaigns, which is again way above our average. And as I said in the previous one, we allocated a smaller budget. Like obviously we didn't allocate as much budget as we allocate for the always on campaigns. However, when we look at the data at the end of Q4 and Q1, what we saw was that the percentage of audience that we reach on the marketing side was actually nearly identical of the product value campaigns that we have or other content campaigns we have that we allocate much more budget. And like when you think about that, it was obvious, like, okay, LinkedIn was prioritizing this ad type to increase the adoption, and we were in beta. So if you're in beta, you always get good results. But more importantly, the interesting thing was that since it was a new format, the audience didn't know about that format. Like it didn't feel like an ad. Therefore, they engaged better. But like since there was no exact CTA, understanding the impact was more challenging. And then I realized something. Maybe these thought leadership ads don't need to be bringing pipeline, but they need to be doing something else. And that is, actually, can you please move to the next slide? So, as I said, these campaigns penetrate a better audience. Like you can reach more audience than a static campaign or than a video campaign, and they cost less. These ad types humanize your brand. Your audience engage better, and they basically engage with you rather than your company. But the more important, and I think the most important part was that I love creating remarketing campaigns with the LinkedIn audience, because if you create a remarketing audience with your website data, you will miss that audience. There is always this third-party tracking problem, and probably you'll be reaching like 20% of your audience. But LinkedIn provides the first-party data, so the perfect remarketing audience. And imagine, since the engagement rate in thought leadership is already off the charts, you can create remarketing audiences from the people who engage with your thought leadership content. So I pivoted the thought leadership campaign idea. I was like, okay, maybe these campaigns don't need to be impacting the pipeline right away. They don't need to be even bringing a website visitor, but they need to be used as the first line of your strategy. Like because you will be reaching a huge amount of audience. This audience will already be engaging with your content, so you can create an audience that engages with your thought leadership content or watches your thought leadership video, and then you can use this audience not in the marketing campaigns, in your content campaigns, in your social proof campaigns, in your product value campaigns. And what we realized is that, okay, it is not a cold audience, completely cold audience, but it is also not as hot as like a pricing page audience. But it is a perfectly mild audience. That audience now engages like maybe 30%, 35% better than the cold audience. And again, since it is really easy and cheap to create this audience, it is like a perfect way to add your demand generation strategy. Are there questions? Should I? Okay.
I'd
We're
actually I'd
gonna
actually like to point out a few things, if you don't mind. In the previous slide, just on that CTR, I'd love it if people in the chat could just write down in the chat, like, what's your average CTR in some of your LinkedIn campaigns? I could tell you that single image ads typically have a 0.5 or 0.3 to 0.5%. So an 8% click-through rate is way higher than the typical single image ads that we see here at Refine. And I'm sure some of the people in the chat could verify that as well. And I think the point of why the CTR is so much higher is because just thinking about the user experience on LinkedIn and just in social media in general, we're so accustomed to seeing ads, the typical ad format on our social platforms that we've developed as banner blindness, right? As soon as we see like a fancy image ad, we're going to ignore it as much as possible and scroll faster, right? But when we see a post from a real person, the profile pictures of a real person, and we see a lengthy body post with hundreds of likes, we're going to pay attention to that. We don't even know that it's actually being promoted and sponsored. I think that's what's really effective about thought leadership ads and why we're seeing such a higher click-through rate, because people like to engage with real people, not companies, and they love to engage with posts by real people. So that's exactly why I think we're seeing this high click-through rate.
Yeah, and actually, a couple of weeks ago, I read this LinkedIn post from Sam, Refine Labs, about how he's observing the product value as having less and less engagement rate if the ads are showing the product Because if you are targeting marketeers or salespeople on LinkedIn, we are so used to seeing product ads. We are so used to seeing ads. But if you, I don't know, use memes or if you use something else, we then don't automatically consider that as an ad. And we read about that and then we engage. But now we are immune to all of these ads like that look like ads. We are immune to looking at the product ads. We are immune to seeing all of those G2 badges.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm seeing in the chat people mentioning 0.4, 0.5 to 0.7. So yeah, exactly what we're seeing with some of the other ad formats, single image, even video as well.
There's a couple questions in the chat that I do feel like thread really nicely on this topic that we're at right now with click-through rate and engagement. So the first question is, just for everybody, if there's no CTA, how can you look at click-through rate?
So it is not a CTR for your website, but people can still click on your profile. People can still click on company page profile or click on the comment section. So it is like clicking for company page, clicking for profile, or basically clicking for comments.
Absolutely.
That's why it is not a hot audience, but perfectly mild audience.
Perfect. Another question here. This is switching from click-through rate to content consumption. How good is the interaction metric for content consumption in your eyes, such as, for example, greater than 50% views? Do you have reliable data for what are good metrics, such as percentage of audience that engaged, cost per engagement, et cetera? I guess we'll dig into a little bit of how you're looking at content consumption and engagement with these formats.
So I would say for videos, I would say the metric I always check is 75%. If people watch 75% of the video, it is a good content consumption. And if I use this metric and compare this metric with our benchmark, I need to verify that number, but it's a good number. But I check, but definitely a good number. And what was the first part? Sorry, it was just a long question and I got carried away.
All good. What is the good interaction metric for content consumption in your eyes?
I think in the thought leadership ads, for example, the CTR is a good measure of that because as we just explained, like since there isn't a link to click through, it actually is people clicking on the post, right? So if you have a lengthy post, most often LinkedIn will clip it and it'll have that button that says see more. So if people click on that, that's indicative of the CTR. And that shows that people want to consume more of that post. That could also be a leading metric to look at for thought leadership specifically, the CTR for engagement and consumption.
Also, it depends on the objective you choose. For example, if you choose a reach objective, then CTR and engagement rate will be equal. But if you use a traffic objective, then CTR will be probably tags as well, but this time engagement rate will not include tags. There's a difference between traffic objective and reach objective there, but on the reach side, ER equals to CTR.
Absolutely. One more question, and then we're gonna table all the other questions on this topic to the very end, just making sure that we get through the other topics, but we'll get to them. I really like this one because it's more of an operational question. Let's see. I had it just pulled up. When you are evaluating which posts to promote, is there some type of benchmark that you do based on the performance of it organically? Like you let it run, there's a certain, like you choose the best ones and then you promote it. What's kind of like your flow on discovery or deciding which thought leadership ads to promote?
So there are two answers for that. The first answer will be the more educated answer, and the second answer is my answer. In general, what we do with Alice, Liam, or friend, we look at the post that got the most engagement, that got most comments, and like I would say the most juicy ones. In my post, we do the same thing, but also sometimes I realize that like normally normally on average my posts get like, I don't know, 30K, 50K impressions. But sometimes my posts end up getting like 1K impression, 2K impressions. So I'm like, you know what, that post can actually do really well, but it needs to get impressions. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to promote that. So far, all of these posts, after they got promoted, they ended up getting a lot of good results. So it is a bit gut feeling because I write that post. I'm like, I know my audience. I know they are going to engage. So if I know that they are going to engage, even though my post doesn't get any engagement organically, I promote it.
Interesting. So it's a little bit of a blend of thinking of quality content.
Yeah,
And
like because
also,
the algorithm works weirdly on LinkedIn. Like sometimes your post reaches like I don't know 50,000 people. Sometimes the same kind of post reaches 1,000 people. And like okay, if my post reaches 50,000 people and gets only 10 likes, okay, maybe it is not a good post. But if I reach like 1,000 people and get 10 likes, I'm like, you know what? If I reach 50,000 people, it would have been better. So I need to do it in a paid site.
such a good call out. Okay, keep the questions coming. We will get to them in the end. I just want to make sure that we go through the next section, and then we have a couple of other experiments that we want to also prioritize for today's call. So Malin, let's hear from you on your experience with thought leadership ads and takeaways you have for everyone here.
Yeah, I think so. Before I kind of highlight how a lot of experiments we ran kind of prove and validate exactly what Janberg experienced on the Cognism side, I like to set a little bit of pretext around thought leadership ads and any new ad format launched by LinkedIn. So whenever a new ad format and this was validated actually through my LinkedIn reps. After speaking with them, they told me that whenever a new ad format is launched on LinkedIn, they benefit from having their own ad inventory, which is separate from the ad inventory of other ad formats. In other words, a thought leadership ad is not going to be in the same auction as a single image ad, even though both ad formats appear on your feed. They're going to be in their own separate auctions and inventory. So your thought leadership ad is bidding against other competitor thought leadership ads, not other ad formats. And this kind of is the reason why we're seeing some of these cheaper distribution costs and engagement rates, which comes with being an early adopter. So the experiment that we ran was basically through one of our companies who are focused in insurance. We wanted to test thought leadership ads and compare that to our standard single image ads. And our hypothesis was that because we're being an early adopter, we're expecting cheaper distribution costs through the unique CPM. As well, we're going to expect a higher engagement rate, as I kind of explained with banner blindness. We're expecting people to click and engage better with thought leadership ads. And so for our testing, we tested this across 1 quarter. Like I said, with our client in the insurance space, we're targeting natively on LinkedIn using job titles and industry, targeting HR professionals at B2B companies to reach them with our insurance products. And so if you go forward one slide, these two charts just clearly lay out exactly what we expected to see. So the chart on the left is speaking to engagement, click-through rate. The chart on the right is speaking to distribution costs, how much it costs to reach 1,000 people. The thought leadership ad you'll see on the left table there, or the left chart, you'll see that it has a 7% click-through rate versus a 0.5% click-through rate on single image ads. That's a significant difference that we also saw with Janberg's experiment on Cognism. Just a way significantly higher click-through rate and engagement on those ads. We also have another ad format in the mix here called document ads. This is another ad format that we can probably discuss more in the open discussion section, but we just also want to include that in there just to give perspective, another newer ad format experiencing a higher click-through rate right there. And then when we look at the distribution cost, how much does it cost to reach your audience? It's so much cheaper to use thought leadership. Just look at that, $320 compared to, $664. So almost half the cost, basically, more than half, to reach the same audience with the same campaign objective. So what this tells us is, if you go one slide forward, is if you want to penetrate your audience with the message long term, you're not trying to do short term lead gen, lead capture. You want to get your message across to your audience for cheap and have them actually consume that message by clicking to read more, clicking on the comments, following your account, perhaps sending a connection request to see more of your posts. Our suggestion is to test out thought leadership ads. They're very cheap. They're very exciting right now. There's not a lot of people in using this ad format. So when you are an early adopter, adopter, you're going to see these cheap costs. And as we suggest this, more of you are going to use this now, which will drive up the costs a tiny bit. But, because we are all in the space of being early adopters, I think we're still going to benefit from its cheap distribution costs. And that's what I'll say about the thought leadership part of this segment.
I'm so glad
I
you
have a
brought this
question.
up
Sorry.
with being an early adopter. I think whenever there's a new type of format, there is that advantage, right? Especially being experimentative and not, having the same competition. So I'm so glad that you called that out, because it is definitely a little bit of like an asterisk when we're talking about some of this experimentation.
Yeah, when I spoke to some of my LinkedIn reps, they mentioned like they obviously have purview over a lot of different accounts of varying sizes, and what the data they shared with me is that a lot of people are still doing single image, video, and message ad formats. These companies that spend a lot on LinkedIn just haven't adopted some of the newer formats, such as thought leadership. And here at Refine, we're really for experimenting with new ad formats and being on top of anything new that LinkedIn and other platforms release. So we have the benefit of being that early adopter.
Yeah, I think it is because of the statistical. Like when you think about that, to use thought leadership as you need your people to produce content. But when you think about it, only maybe 1% of the people on LinkedIn post, and there's always this weird thing. Like if I post on LinkedIn, I would expose myself. I would expose my company. But I think this ad format encourages people to be more active on LinkedIn, and that's why it is even more important.
Absolutely. All right. We're gonna just looking at time here. If you have more thought leadership questions, please put them in the chat. We're gonna come back to it. But we have another experiment, just to shift here slightly, that Jimberk has been experimenting with. Again, if you have thought leadership questions, please put them in the chat. I hate to stop the conversation there, but we have a couple more experiments we want to get to. Jimberk, do you want to transition us here?
Sure. So I had this interesting idea, and like 4 months ago, I ended up using Sales Navigator because I learned that there's this intent data that LinkedIn provides based first-party data. And one of the most disappointing things on LinkedIn is that there's no native connection between Sales Navigator and LinkedIn Campaign Manager. There is now, apparently we will be in beta in a week or so, but like, yeah, it is still not publicly released. Therefore, I was like, okay, maybe we should test this intent data. And how we can test this data? Okay, let's export manually 25 companies that are showing the most intent and run a campaign targeting only these 25 companies, like 1 to 5 ABM campaign with LinkedIn intent data. And we first start with rich campaigns. And again, we shortlisted 25 companies, and we made sure that there is no open opportunity, or these companies did not receive any paid ad impression in the last 60 days. I wanted these companies to show the intent, but that intent I thought should have come from non-paid side, organic intent. So we created 2 campaigns for the sales persona and marketing persona in both US and in the UK. And we basically kept everything same in the campaign settings. And we duplicated 2 types of campaigns, thought leadership campaign and our normal content campaigns with traffic objective. And although we haven't focused on clicks or conversions in thought leadership rich campaigns, or we didn't focus on cost per conversion, or I don't know, CPC on a traffic campaign, what we saw that interestingly, the number of website visitors was better and was significantly higher than our average. And more surprising part was that although it was such a targeted campaign, like we were targeting 25 enterprise campaigns, companies, well, however, CPC was almost 2x lower than our average in both sales side and marketing side. And it was because apparently the intent data was a proper data, like those companies were already showing intent. And once we showed them relevant content, even though we didn't try to get cheap CPC, they start to click and they start to engage with our content and they start to visit our website. Then the second part was that, okay, now it works on the top of the funnel level, but will it work on bottom of funnel? like everyone loves conversation ads, and they're like, I think, great way to run your remarketing campaigns. Now we are testing these 25 companies in our remarketing bucket with Convo ads. However, it has been like 4 weeks. We still don't have enough data, but it is just a test on flight. If they invite me for the third round, I will definitely explain the results in the next one.
I love it. Any questions on this experiment here before we go on to the next one? Going once, going twice. All right, if it does come up, we'll answer it in the end as well. All right, Malin, now it's over to you. Eager to hear your thoughts on this experiment that you have done.
Yeah, so there's been a trending topic here with our clients at Refine Labs, which is ABM marketing. A lot of companies are either doing it or they're very interested in ABM plays and how they could do that on LinkedIn, whether it's one-to-one advertising or one-to-many. So when it comes to one-to-many, LinkedIn offers a solution where you can upload lists to LinkedIn. So you can either upload a company list of the names of companies that you want to reach, or you could upload contact lists. And so a lot of our clients here at Refine Labs are enjoying and are excited about this list option, and we're experimenting with company lists being applied to their LinkedIn campaigns. And so what we did was we wanted to compare what happens to distribution costs, what happens to reach when we run targeted lists versus just the native campaign builds on LinkedIn. And by native, I mean within LinkedIn, we're just applying job title filters, industry perhaps, layering it with company size or seniority, but we're not applying that list of names of companies that we want to go after. So in this experiment with one of our clients, I have a lot of different slides here pertaining to different clients, some of the learnings from each of them. But this one in particular, we ran targeted lists for 2 quarters earlier on in the year, and we want to really look at what happens to distribution costs. And it was clear to us that we spent significantly less, of course, on our targeted list. However, we noticed that the unique CPM, which basically means cost to reach 1,000 people, was significantly lower with an uploaded list versus the native targeting that's available on LinkedIn. So what this means is that if you want to penetrate more of your audience, get in front of them with your message, especially from target companies that you really desire to be in front of, a targeted list, an uploaded list is the route you want to take. And even when you look at actual conversions, of course, these campaigns are more focused on brand awareness and reach than, bottom of funnel plays. But we noticed that even when you look at the actual platform demos that we were getting, they were significantly cheaper to drive through an uploaded list than they were through LinkedIn's native targeting.
I have so many questions here.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Firstly, what kind of list would you recommend? Contact level or company level?
I think company level is the easiest to build a large list. So that is important actually. When you work with lists, you don't want your audience to be super small, because whenever an audience is super small on LinkedIn, whether it's an uploaded list or natively, you will experience higher distribution costs. So with a company list, you're able to get in front of a broader audience size than a contact list, which is much smaller.
And for the size of audience, what would be your threshold? Threshold for what kind of audience size would you recommend going with LinkedIn native audience, and for what amount of audience would you prefer to go with list?
Yeah, for a targeted list, I go with the LinkedIn minimum, which is around 50K users for an uploaded list. For native targeting, I'd go a little bit broader, 100K plus, just because with native, you're getting in front of a lot of companies that you might not actually want to be in front of. So there is that wasted spend there, but you still want to budget for a higher audience size on the native side.
Awesome. And I have one last question, and apparently someone also asked, match rate on LinkedIn. So it is definitely not 50% or on Facebook. Yeah. Like in my experience, I have never seen 100%. Even though I had like perfectly crafted list, like 300 companies, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, literally dummy proof. I have never seen 100%. It is always 95%. Is this something you're also experienced again as well?
Exactly, yeah. I find that the match rate is significantly higher, and that kind of answers your first question as well, Janberg, about which type of list I'd use. There's just a higher match rate with company names, because all you have to provide is a company name and their website. And sometimes you don't even need to provide the website. You can get away with just company name. And so I typically see 80 to 95% match rates, never 100. And with contact lists, what you're doing is providing emails, which are most likely professional emails, not the actual email they use to log into LinkedIn. Job titles on your list might not be the exact same job titles you find on LinkedIn. So there's a lot of mismatch that happens with contacts. And I saw somebody ask in the chat, 50K for an audience size, 50K companies or 50K people? 50K people. Because when you are using a company list, you still have to use job title layering on top of that, right? We're not reaching everyone at the org. We're using a list, and then we're also layering on job titles through LinkedIn's campaign manager.
Well, and there's a couple of questions as we're on the logistics side. I know we have a couple more slides that's going to go into more details of this experiment. Before we get there, a couple of logistics. Do you have a recommendation of tool for these lists? Typically here at Refine Labs, we use whatever tool that the client has, but any specifics on this piece of it?
Yeah, so a lot of our clients will provide us lists with their, sales database. So the sales team will have a list of prospects they develop through, the Salesforce instance and other tools, prospecting tools. And once we have that list of names, we'll just upload that to LinkedIn. So in terms of building that list, you have to speak to maybe your sales team, your marketing team, get them working together so that you can identify actual real companies, whether you want to go enterprise, you want to go mid-market, SMBs, what's that strategy there, and then decide, what companies fall into which category.
Yeah, and I see
And
Jim smiling over there because Cognizant would be a great tool as well.
yeah, that one, and plus I was actually going to add something what Melin said. What I realized in my experiences in both Cognizant and DeepCrawl is that if you only speak with sales, obviously they will be giving you all of the enterprise names. Obviously Netflix, Facebook, Google. Like, okay, everyone wants to target Netflix, everyone wants to target Facebook. But I strongly recommend everyone to have a sanity check with your RevOps team. Because salespeople love to get enterprise deals, but you need to put actually your ICP, not all of the giants.
That's such a great call out. Also, just a couple more clarifying questions on just when we're talking about lists and list building for this targeting. Question, isn't the targeted list a group of companies that are already engaging in your content? Thoughts on this?
Yeah,
You
that's
can do
that's
that.
that's one way to build a list for sure, is to it's basically retargeting at that point. You're retargeting companies that are already engaging with you. That's one route. You might be able to use some of the LinkedIn analytics tools there, especially if you own the company page or you have that insights permissions. You can look at that and see which companies are following your page, engaging, build a file off of that. But in this current experiment that I'm presenting right here is actually just a cold audience targeting. So we're looking at just prospects for the company.
Great call out. So it's more of that cold audience versus the retargeting based on content consumption. And then one other, and I swear we'll get on because there's more really great slides here of the experiment data. But when you are building out this list, we're talking about the targeted list. How much firmographic targeting do you suggest layering on top of that company list?
That's a great question. So for sure, I'd say you must include job titles or functions. If you find that you have a very narrow list of titles, what you'll see is that the size of the audience shrinks quite a bit. So what you want to do then is kind of layer on job function. Maybe you should try to open it up to speak to more of the other team members in that department. Let's say you're going after marketing professionals, and at first you might have targeted just VPs, the decision makers, right? The CMOs, but that audience size is super small, just 5K users. That's going to be a little too small and to run just because you're going to see high costs associated with that. The distribution will be higher, and also you might cause ad fatigue. These people might see your ad way too repetitively and be turned off by your content. So we suggest in that case, open it up to job functions. Try to include some of those more of the influencers in your org, in that marketing team. People in this, digital marketing roles, etc. That kind of sparks the conversation amongst one another and like, hey, did you see this solution that's out there? It solves their problem. And they kind of bubble that up to their decision makers. That's a good route as well. So on top of job titles, job functions, you could try to layer on skills as well. That's like a tertiary option. I would say like aside from job titles, to target specific skills in that org people might have. This might be more relevant to people in the software space, like if they know a specific language, a coding language or something like that. Very specific skill could be a good option. But we typically recommend layering job titles with and job function with the company names.
That's a great call out. And I think it's something also that's missing a lot of times when we talk about B2B advertising as well, is that there is such an importance with influencers as well. We talk very heavily about, obviously getting the decision makers and being very tight in your targeting, but there is power in reaching those influencers who begin, sprinkling in the thread of an idea of a product or solution or issue to those decision makers as well. So such a great call out there. We're going to move along here. Keep adding your questions. We'll keep going on with
Actually,
this.
one last thing I'll say also with the smaller audience size, let's say you do want to just focus on decision makers and you don't want to include the influencers. Just understand that because the audience size is smaller and they're going to see your ads more frequent, you have to have a content library ready to rotate ads more frequently. So if you want to stick to a very small audience, just be sure that you have enough ad content to support that audience.
Absolutely.
And so this example is just a qualitative analysis we had from a different client. We just noticed that when we targeted the same job titles, but we use a company list layered versus the native company industry targeting, we noticed that the targeted list actually had more engagement from decision makers coming in than influencers, which is surprising because the native targeting also includes the same job titles, the higher up decision maker titles. But for some reason, I think LinkedIn kind of allows some sort of expansion to happen, even though we deselect our expansion options on LinkedIn targeting, they still allow expansion to happen, which we see qualitatively. We see likes from influencer group coming in on the left-hand side versus on the targeted list, we see a lot more decision makers. Let's talk about campaign objectives. So when using lists, what is the best objective to use? And we're a big proponent of our strategy here at Refine Labs is the reach objective, just because it helps us penetrate audiences a lot better, faster, for cheaper. And this is certainly the case. We ran one test with a different client earlier in the year where we took our uploaded list and we split the traffic between a traffic objective and a reach objective. And we just noticed that across different regions, actually, we just noticed that both in North America and in EMEA, we had a greater cost to reach our audience with an uploaded list using the reach objective than the traffic. And this is because the traffic objective is really designed to target people in your audience who are likely to click on ads and exclude people who are not likely to click on ads. And as we preach here at Refine, there's a lot of dark social happening on LinkedIn where people scroll and absorb content but don't click on anything. And so the reach objective really helps you get in front of those people and not exclude them from your advertising. So lastly, this is more of a logistical learning that we had when using lists. You might come to a situation where you have a gigantic list of companies, right? You have, like, in this case, we had 6,000 named accounts in this list. But however, in this list, we had varying types of companies in the same list. We had big enterprises, we had small SMBs in the same list, right? And what actually happens is when you upload and target a giant list like this of varying companies of different sizes, is that LinkedIn focuses all its efforts on those enterprise accounts. It has the most number of people on LinkedIn typically, and so LinkedIn finds it easiest to show your ads to them. And what happens is a lot of your list does not see your ads. So in this particular client's case, in early in the year, we noticed that only about 9% of our list was actually engaging and seeing our ads. And that's a big red flag for us because we're basically not hitting any of the other accounts that we desire to reach with our advertising. And that's kind of exemplified in the next slide, actually, is basically we had these big names, Amazon, Microsoft, these big tech companies in that list, eating up all those impressions. You can see all the members targeted, number of impressions, and then you just see just no impressions coming in from equally valuable companies on this list.
We had the same thing, like 20 companies got like 30% of our budget, 40% of budget in our someone from my team, Chris is here. He has the exact numbers. Chris, if you're hearing me, just write the chat all of the numbers you saw. Like, it was literally 20 companies getting 30% of our budget, and we had to exclude those companies because like we were actually spending 30K, 40K for Salesforce every month. And like I don't want to spend that money for Salesforce.
Exactly. So the learning that we came away with this was that when you're going to upload a list, think about the companies in that list. Do they all follow the same criteria? For example, why isn't Amazon lumped in with some of the other, Paxa and Peter Miller companies that have probably a lower employee count? Use that as a basis to segment your list. So have a list of enterprises, perhaps the top 25. What we use is employee count. So if these companies have a large employee count, we'll have one list targeting them. And then we'll have a separate list that has some of the smaller company sizes. And then we'll upload both lists and have separate campaigns running to each, just so that we distribute the budget more evenly and help those other smaller companies actually see our ad. So that was one of the main learnings that we learned was avoid large lists when you're applying them to LinkedIn ads.
Malin, fantastic as usual. I feel like finding the sweet spot with targeting is always an ongoing quest. And so it's really interesting to see advancement in native targeting and list targeting, and really ensuring that you are reaching the right audience. I thought it was really interesting when you had the two contrasting of native audiences versus list targeting and how much more specific the list targeting was, because that expansion can happen even though we don't have it clicked on, right? Okay, we have plenty of time reserved. I know that there is a whole lot of questions that are coming in. So we'll go ahead, and as we're shifting to just Q&A, I have a question for both Jim Burke and Malin before we kick this off. We talked about a couple of, experiments that you have either ran through or have seen success with. I'm super curious, are there other experiments that you either have your eye on that you really want to deploy, maybe you just aren't able to at the moment, or it's on the docket? Or is there something that's currently in flight that you could just like tease out a couple of insights or findings or what you're doing?
So one of the stuff that I'm really hopeful about is the CTMS, click to messages. Apparently, so if you are using conversation ads, you might know that they are not allowed in European Union because of some cookie policies, or I don't know, some European shit. But now apparently LinkedIn is having this CTM campaign. It is literally the conversation ads, but the user sees it on their LinkedIn homepage, just like a single image chat. They click to CTA, but as soon as they click onto CTA, they see the conversation. So it directs them to their inbox, and then they start to have the combo workflow. We first tested it in the beginning of January or February. It was so buggy that we had to pause. Then they updated it again, and I think we have been testing it for the last couple of weeks. Haven't seen the success yet because it's just been a couple of weeks, but I think it's a great idea. Like, it could be a great way for a remarketing campaign. You would click on the ad, and it will just direct you to Convo page, and then you can actually personalize the whole workflow depending on who you are targeting. Yeah, that was me.
Malin, what do you got?
Yeah, so I kind of teased it a little bit in in the thought leadership experiment that we previewed, which was this new ad format that we're rolling out with some of our clients, which is document ads. It's just a fancier carousel ad format on LinkedIn, which you can slide through pages of a PDF that you would normally kind of do some lead gen with. It's kind of basically gated content, honestly, that people can consume directly on LinkedIn. And we're seeing, as shown in that slide earlier, we're seeing a really good engagement rate with that, a 5% click-through rate, which is much higher than typical carousels that we've seen in the 0.5 range. And we're also seeing cheaper distribution costs. Again, it's a newer ad format. new inventory, so it's cheaper to be an early adopter there. So if you're thinking about doing carousel, consider turning that into like a PDF or some sort of consumable content and making it a document ad on LinkedIn instead of a carousel.
Yeah, actually about that, we had an interesting test. I use document S for social proof, and basically I use it for the website visitors. If they visit the website, then okay, social proof document S. Then I thought it would be a warmer audience, even warmer audience, so that I could target them with the conversation S, with some demo S. It wasn't. Like it didn't work. However, we tried.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
because you could retarget based on people like flipping through the pages, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but
interesting that didn't
literally
work.
CTR and conversion rates were the same
Okay,
with the audience who actually engaged with that content and who didn't engage with that document that.
got it.
Thank you so much for answering this. Okay, we have a whole list. We'll see what we can get through. We'll try and do some rapid fire answers here. We're going to transition back to thought leadership. Thought leadership had so many engagement and questions. So I think this is really, striking a chord here. Okay, so first question, how much effort, what do you do to optimize profiles you're using for thought leadership ads?
None. But like, I think our profiles have already been optimized. Like, Cognizant has this internal culture, just like Refine Labs. Like, we do value social selling a lot. However, if I were to optimize, I don't know, I think this depends, like all of my average answers. Depends on your company, depends on your industry, depends on what you are selling, depends on your audience. Malin, I think you have a better answer than I have.
I'd
I
say
hope
in
you have a
terms
better answer.
of optimizing your page, I'd say if you know that your profile is going to be used for thought leadership promotion for your company, make sure your profile has a link to a call to action on your page, right? In your about section. It's kind of similar to how people like on Instagram will like, click my profile and look at my bio to see the link to sign up for this or whatever. It's kind of the same play there. Just have your profile optimized to somehow drive that traffic to a page that you want them to consume. Because as I said, you can't really include a CTA button on thought leadership ads. So that's one way to kind of have your profile optimized for that.
Okay, next question. How do you manage frequency with thought leadership campaigns? I have seen a few thought leader ads over 3+ times, and it is more obvious it is an ad when I see it more than once.
Yeah, so at the ad unit level, I always look for the threshold around 3 to 5 is when I would consider an ad to be exhausted. So after like the 5.0 frequency, I would for sure shut that one off and replace it with a different message, perhaps from a different person in your org to freshen things up. Because that could be another thing, right? If you're only showing thought leadership ads from just one employee, that can get a little annoying for some people. So at an audience level, looking at the frequency around 2 to 3 for one person is the route I take. And at the individual ad unit, I would do 5 as the max.
Great.
And I have the exact data that we actually pulled last week. So on in Cognizant, we have different benchmarks for type of campaigns. For retargeting, we realized that after 7.5, we see the ad fatigue. But if it is a reach campaign, reach ad, it is 3.8. However, for thought leadership, it was 2.2. And I think it is more like, okay, you see a human post and you are used to seeing one post from one person on LinkedIn for one time only. So like apparently if people start seeing it more than twice, the engagement starts to decrease.
All right. We touched on this a little bit when we talked about document ads. But let's get into carousel posts. Would you say time in carousel posts is less worth it because you cannot push them into thought leadership ads, perhaps converting them into videos and then reposting them organically before promoting into thought leadership to an ICP audience? I guess, how are you thinking of just content format per se?
So The nice thing about document ads is that you don't have to actually create individual slides like you normally would for a carousel. LinkedIn kind of automatically takes your PDF and just transforms that into a carousel. So that's very efficient in one way. You just upload the doc, you just make sure the doc looks good, the PDF, and LinkedIn will do the work to like make those slides. All right. So that saves time for a carousel ad. Any thoughts there, John?
Yeah, I was just saying the same.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
find carousels are a lot of work, a lot of time, and they just don't have the best engagement. And I'm glad that LinkedIn has this alternative option for it.
And the thing is, I hate it when I don't see all of the data. Like for document tests, I can see the click-through rate between the document pages. I can see how many people basically visit all of my pages. In Carousel Ad, it is a black box. Okay, I can see one click-through rate, but it could be for like 2 carousels or like 5, but I have no idea at what point there's a drop off. Therefore, I have no idea how to optimize that campaign. But with document ad, I know the drop off points. I can see drop off points so that I can optimize my content by looking at that data.
100%.
All right, I think we have one or two more. Then maybe we'll have to do like a Refine Labs LinkedIn post where people can drop more questions afterwards, and we can, dig into those as well, because I know that there's so many more that we cannot get to today, unfortunately, due to time. But another question quickly as we are nearing the end. Let's transition to list targeting from Thought Leadership. What would you change if a client has a company list of about 50 companies, i.e. unlikely to hit around 50,000 users?
I
Yeah,
mean,
so
sorry.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Please, you go.
Okay. Yeah, so in that case, your audience target, your size is going to be pretty small, and if the company really wants to go after that list, you will probably want to launch those ads anyways. Just expect higher costs than you typically would see with larger audience, and if you're fine with those CPMs, but you're getting in front of them, then I don't see why not. You should still run that campaign.
And in my case, we did test a one to few campaign with like maybe 30, 35 companies. And when we filtered them with job titles and all of the other targeting that we normally have on LinkedIn, the audience size was like lower than 300. So we had to expand that audience. And uh, this time we realized that, okay, we can't not filter by job title. So we excluded the completely irrelevant job functions, and like we end up having like maybe 400 people, 450 people. And
Yeah.
although we were able to run the campaign, like the CPM was so high, and also the ad deliverability was awful. Like, okay, we have the budget, but it is just we hitting like maybe 20% of that audience, and we can't just hit the whole 100%. Then we were like, okay, let's add 40 companies more, 45 companies more, and we end up having like maybe 2,000 people. And with 2,000 people, actually we were able to hit like 80% of the audience. So like if the audience is bigger, LinkedIn basically delivers your ad to more people.
Yeah, and if you can't expand the audience, if you can't add more companies, if you really can't add more job functions, another route to take is the ad format itself. As we said, thought leadership ads are so cheap. So if you have a very small audience, which you're going to expect higher costs with, why not run with the cheapest ad format, which is thought leadership? So you can try it that way as well.
Awesome. All right, well, we are at time here. I feel like whenever we chat about this topic, we could go on all day. It's always a fun conversation. I appreciate everyone making the time and joining this call or listening to the recording afterwards. Speaking of thought leadership, highly recommend following both Malin and Jen Burke on LinkedIn. They are obviously very fantastic and share really great insights. So small little plug to go ahead and go follow them as well. We will be sending out the recording as well, or we'll have it recorded. So if you want to look back and re-listen to anything, that will be an option as well. But again, thank you so much for your time and for making, hanging out with us for this past hour. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.